Hi, I'm Imogen Lamport from Inside Out Style.
And I'm Jill Chivers from Shop Your Wardrobe.
Today we thought we'd talk about vulnerability. It's a topic that's come up just briefly in a couple of videos we've done, and it's something too that it's touched a nerve. We've had some interesting feedback on those videos, and so we thought we'd kind of actually delve a little bit more deeply into it today because it is a really important topic.
Yeah.
It's something I know I struggle with hugely. Part of it's my thinking personality, I think, and part of it's also my upbringing, which was very much about, you know, you just pull your socks up, turn over a new leaf, and that asking for help or not being, was it perfect? I don't think I've ever got the it had to be perfect message, but not achieving whatever it was, or needing somebody else to do something or be something for you was a sign of weakness. And so I think it's very fascinating, and with all the work that Brené Brown's done in recent years, and we'll link to her TED Talk if you've not seen that, it's absolutely worth watching. It's incredibly powerful, and I think it's actually brought to the fore a really important thing that, because in many ways style relates back to self-image, and that's a very vulnerable place.
It can be, very much so. And Brené Brown is a trailblazer, and what she has done in the field of authenticity and vulnerability is huge, and the way we think about those things and to reframe those, vulnerability is not weakness, which is often, I think, how we can experience it for ourselves. It can feel like weakness, but what she says about it is vulnerability sounds like the truth and feels like courage. And I really love that. It sounds like the truth, but it feels like courage. And she goes on to talk about belonging and self-acceptance and how they're linked, and our sense of belonging can never exceed our level of self-acceptance. And when you really think about that, that is life-changing. That whole idea that the more I can accept myself, and part of the journey through that, and we've talked about in a previous video, through self-kindness and building your sense of self-worth from the inside out, they all feed into how you feel about yourself and how you're presenting to the world. And you know what's amazing is when you can step further into that space, how many more possibilities exist, and how much more you are available for the things in the world that interest you. You're less being drawn to the shoulds and the things that you should do, and it's more, what would I like to do? You know, I was chatting to someone recently about how I feel I live a creative life. You know, 10 years ago, and certainly 20 years ago when I was in the corporate world, if you'd said you will be living a creative life, I would have laughed. I would have thought that's absurd. And this idea that vulnerability has something to do with it would have been strange. I wouldn't have been able to connect those things.
And I think it's really important. One of the things that people often comment to me, they go, you know, you just make these videos and do these things, and I couldn't do that. And I go, I feel incredibly vulnerable making these videos. And the first decision I ever made about putting a photograph of myself on the blog was actually huge for me, because I am not one of those people who is happy being out there.
Right.
I'm naturally introverted. I am fairly private in some ways, and the decisions I make when I decide to reveal something about myself, there's a lot of thoughts gone into that before I do it.
Yeah.
And I generally, will do it. And I've talked about my postnatal depression that I had after my son was born, and to me that is postnatal depression a sign of weakness. And I could have come from a family where definitely depression when I was young was seen as a sign of weakness, right, rather than a mental illness.
Yeah.
And so when talking about these things, it's really difficult for me. But I also think, well, there's probably other people out there who are struggling with it. And so for me, and I think that's where the courage comes in.
Absolutely.
But for me, it's the, that I can't be the only person in the world who has these feelings. Yeah. And I can't be the only person who struggles with many things in life. And one of the things people often say to me is, every photo I see of you, you take such a good photo. I go, I took 30 photos for that one photo you saw. I don't have an expectation that it's one and done in the photograph department at all. But it is that, and I know I'm constantly struggling with how much of my own vulnerability I can share, because it's not something, and I think sometimes some people find it much easier, but then I sometimes look at some, what might be seen as vulnerable and actually think that's actually attention seeking, or it's looking for a reaction, it's looking for, it's more manipulative.
And that's where the authenticity piece comes in, and in our social media world, we can spot inauthenticity, in 10 seconds or less, 3 seconds.
Most of us can. I don't think everybody can though, and that's one of those things I find fascinating. Well, I'll think that's really unauthentic, or I'm seeing through that very quickly. And I know other people who they don't see it, and many years later they might finally see it, and I'm thinking, why is it taking you so long? And I think maybe just some of us have a better radar.
Yes, it could very well be that. But that point about vulnerability that's seeking a response, to me, is not vulnerability. No. That's a performance that's designed to elicit a particular response. And to me, true vulnerability is presenting an authentic, imperfect sense to the world with no particular set of expectations about what's going to happen. Now, you have to be smart. You have to make smart choices. And I found this myself when I was talking about my over-shopping journey, that I needed to be careful, that I didn't expose myself to things that I couldn't handle, negative responses that would cripple me. And in the coaching that I do with clients who are in the media, we talk about that as well. Authentic vulnerability is always a powerful choice, but you have to be intelligent about it as well. You don't just want to open yourself to something that could wound you. So I'm working with a client at the moment. It's going to appear in really big media talking about a contentious topic, and she's setting up her assistant to do the comments that she is expecting to receive and to filter them. And she's doing that deliberately because she knows she's vulnerable. Now, I call that smart. I think that's really an intelligent way of doing that. But the authenticity piece is just so critical to it. And, I've had women who have joined my program or contacted me through my blog saying, it was because you told your story and you told it in the way that you did that I was able to really look at my own shopping. And then they often go on to say, and you're the only person in the world who knows about it. Yes. I cannot be vulnerable with anybody else, including the person that I live with, which is, I think, really interesting. And I think you build your vulnerability muscles too.
So what made you decide to, because obviously it's a big deal to be sharing that you have a problem with over-shopping.
Yeah.
So what was the catalyst for you to go, this is something that I should do?
Well, it was really quite self-referential. I started the blog for myself because I wanted to track my journey, and I wanted to do it in a way that had some publicness to it, because I knew myself well enough that if I just privately journaled, I could cheat. And I could fall off the wagon all the time and sort of pretend to do it. Whereas if it was a blog, even if nobody read it but me, it's out there. And of course, I could take it down at any time, all that sort of stuff. But it was a way of setting up some form of external accountability. And so it was completely about my personal journey. Yes. It wasn't about who's going to read this. And it was only when I started to get some media attention that I thought, oh, goodness gracious, others are reading this. And now I'm in this space. I need to maybe expand my frame of reference to think about those kinds of things. And that's also when I started to do a lot more research about shopping centres, how they're designed, about over-shopping, about whether it's legitimate, and I started to educate myself. And I think that was part of the being smart piece, was that I don't want to walk into this space ignorant. I don't want to appear in the media or talk in any public way about something that I cannot back up what my thoughts and feelings are. I need to say something beyond, well, this is what it's like for me. And so those things all sort of helped with that. But I was just sick of it. I was just sick of this issue, and I wanted to find a way out of it. So, it was quite circuitous in a way.
Did you find there was emotionally for you a down, like when you shared, then do you go, oh, I made a big mistake? Do you find that it created an emotional roller coaster?
No, it didn't for me. I'm quite comfortable sharing my emotions. In fact, sometimes I can't help it. It's just, I have trouble with the other. I have trouble with the suppressing or keeping my emotions to myself. And that's my problem. So no, it has not been an emotional roller coaster for me, but an increasing level of awareness that when you share something like that, it can prompt something in another person, and their response I always see as being a soft response, but it may be laid in something hard and pointy like anger. And so being aware that whatever response I'm receiving, if someone is provoked, what's at the heart of that provocation is something that needs to be treated with care and kindness, no matter how it's presented. And I rarely get anything that's angry, very rarely. I almost always get it straight to the soft bit.
Yes.
But on occasion with media, I've gotten a bit of, pushback on that, and just recognising that. So I just bypass the pointy stuff and I just go straight to the soft bit, because that's what's really talking. That's how I see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is, something that's fascinating for everybody to think about, is their own relationship with vulnerability.
Oh, yeah.
And is it okay? And I think, and that's one thing that Brené Brown's brought in, that it is okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But also being aware of, am I, trying to elicit a response, or am I, actually doing it through a courageous reason, or because somehow it might make my life better, like admitting I'm not perfect, or admitting I need help. Is also something that it's not a sign of weakness.
Yeah. In fact, Brené Brown talks about how others perceive it as strength, but only if it's authentic.
Yes.
And that's what's so interesting about it, and that's why it is such an act of courage to step into that space and speak your truth as it is for you. It is courage walking, it really is.
Yes.
Mm.